We're making apple crumble, and I think you've got a bag for apple day with apples in and all the ingredients you need. These all go together to make a topping on top of the fruit. Now I find it better to make the crumble first, because if you prepare the apples first, they go brown in the dish. So flour, there's no need to sieve flour for a crumble. I'm using wholemeal flour, but you can equally well use plain. And the fat rubs into the flour better if you've got the sugar in the bowl with it. Some people don't like the feeling of the sugar, so if that's the case with you, don't put it in at this stage. Also, the fat rubs into the flour better if it's cut up into small pieces, which you can do with a knife that isn't too sharp in your hand quite quickly and easily. My grandmother sometimes used to use dripping for this, and I believe it's delicious made with dripping, but that's a long time ago. Also, you can put other flavourings in with the crumble if you wish. Things like spices, mixed spice, cinnamon, ground cloves. So rub in using your fingers. If you find that you're getting rather arthritic like I am, and rubbing in with your hands makes your hands ache, or if you're very young and your hands are rather small, you can use a fork, and a nice big fork with well spaced out prongs, and press the fat against the side of the bowl so that it gets incorporated into the flour and oats. And a number of years ago I came across a gadget that I'd seen in the past but not been able to buy anywhere, which will do this job as well, and I've no idea what it's called, but that is for a tool for rubbing fat into flour, and I got that from a charity shop when I was away on holiday, and the person in the shop had no idea what it was for. I was able to tell her, but at the time my hands were getting a bit painful and I found it very useful. So lots of ways of rubbing in. It is a relatively lengthy process, but what you're aiming at is to mix the fat evenly into the mixture, so that when it cooks it makes a nice crunch, a nice crumbly biscuity crunchy surface. When the fat is rubbed in, you can't see the fat separately, and if you give it a shake you shouldn't get any lumps of fat showing on the surface, and then that is finished. Now I'm going to prepare the apples. The dish I'm using is an oven-proof dish, or you can make individual ones. This should serve 4 people, but it won't be very deep in a dish of this size. A slightly smaller dish might be better, but I shall make it in the large dish. Now, to prepare the apples, they've been washed first, and I like to use a peeler. If you prefer, you can use a knife, but you do get a nice thin layer of skin off with a peeler. So peel it methodically. I'm sure if you haven't got a compost you'd put the peelings into the brown bin, but I've got a compost in my garden, so that's where they go. And you can put other fruit with it if you like, or you could put some jam, flavoured jam that you like. When it's getting nearer Christmas, it's nice to have it with some mincemeat, just to make a difference. Or again, you can sprinkle the fruit with a bit of spice. Use a nice sharp knife, cut the apple down towards the board, and there's no danger of cutting your fingers. And then cut it into quarters to If you've got one of these gadgets that will core an apple, that's fine, use that. And take out the hard little papery bits in the middle, because they're not very nice to eat. These are particularly nice apples, but if they're windfalls you're using, you could take the bruises and any insect damage out as well. And then slice the apples into the dish. You can use ready stewed apples if you wish, but the apples will cook in the oven at the same time as the crumble topping cooks, so I don't see the point of dirtying a pan and cooking the apples separately. But I know some people prefer to use ready stewed fruit. Cut the apples into slices. The idea of cutting them is to make them cook more quickly. If you're doing a large quantity of crumble, then you could peel all the apples first and put them in a bowl of salted water to stop them from going brown, or water with a little lemon juice in. If you're using ready stewed fruit or a tin of pie filling, which you can use, it will be ready sweetened. If you like things nice and tart, you don't need to put any sugar on, but I'm putting 2 ounces of sugar onto the fruit. And as this cooks, the advantage of using cooking apples is that the apples will go soft all the way through, and if you don't put much sugar on, they tend to go mushy into a pulp. If you put sugar on, they keep their shape more. So the tastier the apples, the tastier the crumble. If you use dessert apples, which you can use, then the flavour of the apples, you probably wouldn't need any sugar at all. So spread it out. It's easier to put it on with a spoon rather than pushing it all in a pile in the middle and then trying to spread it. So spread it evenly. Try not to get too much piled in the middle. Make sure you've got some at the corners. It tends to cook quicker at the corners than it does in the middle. So you don't want the corners burnt and the middle uncooked. Just a bit. And there we are, it's ready for the oven. After 3/4 of an hour, depending on how deep it is. I'm going to test it with a sharp knife, as skewer would do, in the middle, because that's the part that cooks the last. It's gone in really easily, so the apples are cooked. Usually, it's not all that easy to tell when it's cooked, but if the fruit is soft, then it should be cooked. If you tilt it slightly and you get a bit of juice running up to the surface, then you know it's cooked, but you don't get a lot of juice with apples. If this was plum or a soft fruit like that, then you would get more juice. So if you like it browner than that, you could put it in the oven for a little longer.